Welcome to day 2 of the 5-day Beat Your Cravings Challenge. If you are back for day 2 for this live training, I just want to take a second and congratulate you. And if you are planning to watch the replay as well, I also just want to give you credit for showing up and, again, taking this time out for yourself to not only learn, but to also implement each challenge over these 5 days. And really, these challenges are just meant to be very simple, doable, but foundational elements to completely eliminating cravings while also supporting your entire body as a whole. Because as we learned yesterday, and also from some of the modules inside Practice Better, if you signed up for the challenge through there, you'll know that there are underlying reasons as to why we have cravings in the first place. And so instead of just addressing that surface level symptom, we're actually digging a little bit deeper and looking underneath the surface to figure out how we can support our body as a whole. So today we're going to be talking more about digestion and gut health. So the challenge for today definitely ties closely into that. And that is also one of the not biggest, but one major component that I see play a role in cravings for women, and also other issues as well. So your gut health and your digestion relates to so many areas. So things that go beyond just actual digestive issues. So it could be gas, bloating, constipation, and acid reflux, which are the most common symptoms that I see with women, especially ones who have a slower, more sluggish metabolism. But it can also play a role in your skin health, any autoimmune condition that you might have. It plays a role in your thyroid health. It plays a role in your mood, your sleep, your energy levels. And if we're dealing with chronic digestive issues and we have any level of dysbiosis going on, then this can contribute to having cravings, especially for more carbohydrates and sugar. So those gut bacteria love to feed on sugar. And so if there is dysbiosis and you're noticing bloating on a regular basis, even if you eat like healthy foods and you're feeling bloated, then that's a sign that your gut needs some TLC. So today's challenge is really the first thing that you need to do to address any and all digestive issues. And it's a game changer for a lot of my clients. So we'll talk more about exactly how this is going to help you. And just like yesterday, I have some slides that I'm going to share. So I'm going to share my screen and then we're going to get into it. We're going to have a little bit of a lesson going along as well with today's actual challenge. And if you haven't yet, make sure that you log into Practice Better. If you're having trouble logging in, just respond to the challenge email that you got this morning. I think it went out at 6 a.m. actually. So make sure you check your inbox for that challenge email, and then make sure you log into Practice Better because that is where everything is laid out. There's also a bonus resource in there for today's challenge on mealtime habits for better digestion. So that's something that I use with a lot of my clients. And again, prerequisite to improving your gut health and improving your digestion and all of the other things that are connected to your gut health. All right, so let me just grab the screen share. We're skipping. Okay, so that was from yesterday. So let me just get to the beginning of today. All right, here we go. So I also want to make sure my video is still on the side. There we go. I'm going to adjust a little bit. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to make this bigger for you guys today. Bear with me as I deal with the new technology. All right, so hopefully you can see this. I'm just going to double check to make sure everything is good, and it looks like we're good to go. Okay, so day 2 of the Beat Your Cravings Challenge. Let's start by talking about what we covered in day 1. So if you missed day 1, you can go back and you can watch that replay. It's in this Facebook group. I also linked it up inside Practice Better under day 1. So you'll see at the bottom, there's a recording. It'll open in YouTube. You can watch that while you're going for a walk or folding laundry or cooking dinner, whatever it is. Make sure you watch that replay because some of what we covered is actually going to really help to set you up for success. Just understanding these concepts, it will help you understand why we're doing this cravings challenge in the first place. And also it really is kind of a key piece of your plan. And a lot of women miss this piece whenever they follow a lot of the different diet advice and what I call tools. So macronutrients or macro counting, calorie counting, intermittent fasting, things like that. They follow those tools, but they don't address these foundational concepts. And so what we talked about yesterday was first and foremost blood sugar balance. It is foundational for reducing cravings, having steady energy. So we want to get off that blood sugar roller coaster, and we want to have that even steady energy throughout the day. Also foundational for your mood, for your sleep. So I talked about why you wake up between 2 and 4 a.m. And then also for fat loss, because if insulin is high, which is a blood sugar hormone, it is going to put you in that fat storage mode. So you're storing energy more than you're burning energy. So number 2, the biggest thing that we recapped yesterday, and just a point that I want to drive home over and over again, is that eating blood sugar balancing meals, and yesterday our challenge was to start with just breakfast, eating blood sugar balancing meals that are enjoyable, and we'll talk more about enjoyable on day 5, but this eliminates the need for willpower, and this also makes it easy to stick to without restricting. So if you're ever feeling confused around the nutrition information that's out there, or you feel like no matter what you do, it's just not getting you the results you want, I want you to look closer at, is my meal balancing my blood sugar? And is this also enjoyable? And that's something that you can take with you no matter where you go. So if you're traveling or you're eating out at dinner, you can still build blood sugar balancing meals no matter what. And then the last piece was actually combining protein, carbs, and fats and fiber. That's what's going to be the most satiating and best for your blood sugar. And we started with breakfast. So don't forget, inside Practice Better, you have the balanced meal template, and that goes over examples of protein, carbs, and fats, and then how to actually piece it together with your meals. And if this is something that you're like, oh, wait, this is great information, but like, how do I actually implement it? And you want to customize it for you further, that's what I do with my one-on-one clients. And we look at that balanced meal plate template to start, but then we get really, really good at coming up with our simple go-to meals that are easy to throw together and also help you to see the progress and results that you want. So that is it for the day 2 recap. And again, go back and watch that replay if you have not yet. Another key takeaway that I want to keep driving home is that the answer is not more restriction. So anytime you catch yourself saying, I just need to take out XYZ, whatever it is, sugar, carbs, bread, anything processed dairy, gluten, things like that, the answer is not more restriction or more elimination. It's actually what you need to be adding in that is the missing piece. So more restriction, elimination, and requiring willpower and relying on willpower, whether it's for food stuff or for exercise stuff, it's going to keep you in this cycle of feeling stuck, feeling anxious, feeling out of control around food. So we want to get to a place where we feel calm, we feel in control, and we are confident in our food choices. And the more that you try to restrict, and trust me, because I did this for a long time, even when I was eating healthy foods, I kept going back to starting over after a weekend or after I feel like I slipped up because I was just focusing on that restriction aspect. So the more that you try to restrict, the longer that you're going to be stuck in this yo-yo dieting cycle. And I will say, if you're somebody who doesn't feel like you're in this yo-yo dieting cycle, or maybe you just haven't recognized it yet, I wouldn't have called it a yo-yo dieting cycle when I was in my early 20s, because I didn't see myself as a dieter. I was like, I'm not dieting, I'm just eating healthy foods. But when I looked at it from that restriction aspect, it was much more obvious that it was dieting. And so if this is you, maybe you haven't gotten to that point yet where you feel like you're yo-yoing. But even if you find yourself going between restrictions of like being good, if you say that, and then you feel like you can't control yourself around certain foods, or you just tend to overdo it whenever you're around certain foods, then that is still like a form of yo-yoing that I would consider to be a reflection of that restriction either during the day or during the week. So just keep that in mind. And then lastly, we talked about why we have cravings. So I just want to bring this up again. And honestly, this is something we can go back to over and over again, because cravings are just messages. They're symptoms from our body. And so when we figure out, okay, why are we having these cravings? Is it because I didn't have enough protein with breakfast and I'm on the blood sugar roller coaster now? Or is it because I have gut imbalances and dysbiosis that is causing these cravings? So those are 2 examples. First one we covered yesterday. Next one we're covering today. And then other things too underneath the surface of this iceberg are nutrient deficiencies, especially magnesium, chromium, sodium. Those are big ones I see. We're going to talk about that tomorrow on day 3. hormone imbalances, especially related to your stress hormones, your sex hormones, especially leading up to your period with low progesterone, your thyroid hormones. There are so many hormones that come into play that can cause these cravings. Over restriction, so too many rules, too many restrictions that you're putting on yourself, and that's causing you to have these cravings. And then chronic stress and cortisol dysfunction. So cortisol is too high when it shouldn't be, and then it's also too low whenever it should actually be high. So those are some things that we look into. And again, with my one-on-one clients, we get really clear, just even within the first session, as to which one of these you might be struggling with the most. And it might not be obvious to you until we pull back the layers and figure out like what all the different signs and symptoms you're dealing with are. And then we can have a very targeted plan and approach because we can address it from that root cause perspective. So before we get into today's actual challenge, I want to talk about one of the biggest mistakes that I see women making. And this should be the second mistake. So yesterday we covered big mistake number 1, and today we're covering big mistake number 2, which is, oh wait, hold on. I actually think I messed this up. Sorry. Give me 1 second. We want to go, like, that's not the one we're covering. It could have been messed up whenever I shared my screen. Give me 1 second. Sorry, you're seeing all of the behind the scenes here. Okay, that's better. I don't know why I went back. Why we have cravings. This is where we want to be. I'm just going to make this big so I can keep track of it a little bit better. Okay, so why we have cravings, this is what we just talked about. And what we're talking about more today is the gut imbalances. So today's challenge will address that one more specifically. So what are we covering today? This is where we should be on track. And then we'll get into the big mistake number 2. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about what your actual day 2 challenge is. We're going to talk about also how to determine what works for you, because so many women say, I just want to figure out what works for me. So we're going to get clear on how to actually get closer to figuring that out. I'm going to talk about what you should be paying attention to. We'll go over the mealtime habits for better digestion. I want to make sure you have that resource and you've downloaded it from Practice Better. And then if we have time at the end, we'll do some Q&A. All right, so challenge for day 2 is to eat without distractions. And this sounds so small and insignificant, but it makes a huge difference. And this is a practice. This is something that a lot of people will skip over because they think it's not important. And I can promise you that it is. I wish I knew this sooner, especially with the amount of digestive issues that I developed over years of under eating, over exercising, and just being chronically stressed without realizing it. So eating without distractions. I want you to think about how often you eat while doing other stuff. So while running errands in your car, you're like scarfing down that smoothie, not even chewing it, right? Which is another issue in itself, but you're slurping down that smoothie super fast, standing up in your kitchen, you're super hungry, and you're like snacking while you make dinner, mindlessly watching TV. So you're just sitting in front of the TV, eating without thinking about it, checking emails. So maybe you're eating your salad, which is, healthy in your mind, but then you're also checking email, multitasking on a Zoom call. So this is 2022. It's on Zoom calls. It used to be while sitting in a meeting, like you have a lunch meeting where you're also eating. So I just want you to actually check in and think, like, how many meals do you actually sit down without distractions and focus on that meal? And secondary to that is chewing your food, which a lot of my clients, we have to start here. We chew our food 20 to 30 times. If you think about that, it's almost chewing it until it's liquid. So basically your stomach does not have teeth. And that is the first step to breaking down your food, is in your mouth. But that is an aside for digestion. You'll see that in the mealtime habits for better digestion document as well. So I want you to just simply focus on eating without distractions and getting into a rest and digest state. So rest and digest is the opposite of fight or flight. We talked a little bit about fight or flight mode yesterday as it relates to riding that blood sugar roller coaster. So when your blood sugar drops, your body kicks into fight or flight mode. It thinks it's like running from a threat, even though it's not really running from a threat. It's just your blood sugar dropped, and that's really stressful. And your body needs like an immediate source of energy. And so we want to get out of that fight or flight mode and into rest and digest mode whenever we're eating. That's how we properly break down our food. We get the nutrients out of our food, which are going to help us to feel full and satiated and prevent those cravings later on. We also allow ourselves to actually register when we feel full. So you can eat super quickly and not even realize you feel full until 5 or 10 minutes after you're done eating your meal. So slowing down will help you physiologically from that like digestion process, which is a north to south process, and it's going to help you psychologically. So whenever you actually register that you are eating a meal and that sends signals to your brain that helps to produce those satiating hormones, you're going to feel more satisfied and you're going to not feel like you need to make up for it later on with a quick, easy, super satisfying source of energy, like carbohydrates or whatever like your cravings actually are, right? So it's really the first step to figuring out what works for you, which we're going to get into now, and also the first steps to supporting your digestion. And I'm curious if any of you are here live and you want to let me know if you struggle with digestion issues, if this is something you've ever thought about, paid attention to. 90% of the women who come to me have either bloating or reflux or constipation. And it's not something that's TMI because it really is a huge indicator of what's going on internally. And it's an important thing to talk about whenever it comes to our overall health, our hormone balances, our skin health, our energy, everything basically. So we want to talk about digestion. And I'm curious if you feel bloated, you feel constipated, anything like that on a regular basis, if you rush through your meals. So if this is an area where like, oh yes, I'm definitely missing this piece, let me know. Okay, so now we can talk about big mistake number 2, and then we're going to get into how to start figuring out what works for you. I'm also curious, do you know what works for you? So if you're in this challenge, you might be wondering that, like you might have an idea, but you're not quite sure. Maybe you think you know what you should be doing and you're just not sticking to it. But if you want to know what truly works for you, then this is going to be really important information, because a lot of women make the mistake of just trying to follow a cookie cutter meal plan or recipes. So you search Pinterest for recipes that are keto because you've heard keto is good, or paleo, or maybe even a macro friendly meal plan, which is something that I did. I shared a little bit about that with my story. I followed a perfectly calculated macronutrient plan that, counted my protein, my carbs, my fats. I was eating 6 meals a day. And that is also what led to more blood sugar issues, more digestive issues, more stress around food. And it's because I was missing a lot of the foundational pieces like blood sugar balance and eating in a rest and digest state. But beyond that, it actually wasn't customized to me. And I didn't know how to adjust those macronutrients based on where I was in my menstrual cycle or how I was feeling on a day-to-day basis, knowing that your carbs should be higher some days and your carbs should be lower some days. Same thing with your fat, that can go up and down. And so I'm going to talk about more as to how you can start customizing and thinking about figuring out like what is it from these different cookie cutter recommendations and meal plans and templates that you can actually apply to yourself and make work for you. Because one size fits all does not work. And if anybody tells you it's black and white, like that's a huge red flag. Go the other way and ignore that advice. There are certain pieces that might work for you, but we have to look at how to customize it. So a lot of diets, like I said, they're missing the foundational pieces for long-term health. And what they teach you are diet rules. So you might know exactly how many points a banana is if you've done Weight Watchers, or you might know exactly how many, grams of carbs like this rice cake is if you've ever counted macros. And that's fine, but it's not teaching you anything about how to customize your plan or how your body works and figuring out what it truly needs for long-term success. So what diets don't teach you is what I call biofeedback. So biofeedback includes basically the way your body is talking to you. So your mood, your energy, your cravings, your digestion, your sleep, your hunger, which is why eating in a rest and digest state without distractions is important. So you can realize when you're hungry and when you start to feel full. Biofeedback also includes your menstrual cycle. So where you are from day 1 to 28 to 35, depending on how long your cycle is, where exactly you are in your cycle. That is really important to pay attention to and how you're feeling around that time. Your libido and sex drive, that's a huge indicator of if things are working or not working for you. your recovery in the gym. So if you're chronically feeling aches and pains and you have a hard workout and then the rest of the day you're like, I feel like I got hit by a truck, that's a red flag. And then also your thoughts around food. So if you're always thinking about food, you're obsessing over like when your next meal is going to be, or you travel or eat out or whatever it is, and you're thinking like, well, how am I going to navigate this like food situation? All of those things are also red flags. We want to have a completely neutral relationship with food, and we don't want to have those food thoughts over consuming our brain power because we have more important things to think about. So those are just examples of biofeedback. And with my one-on-one clients, we have an entire biofeedback checklist, and we go through that. And also in our check-in sessions, we talk about, okay, how's your sleep? How's your stress? How's your energy? How's your digestion? And looking at each one of those as a marker. You know, you can rate it from a scale of 1 to 10, or you can just talk about it more subjectively. Like, this is how my cravings have been lately. They're really, really high, but I'm also about to start my period. Or, you know, maybe they're really low because you've been eating more throughout the day. So that's just an example. Which is a good thing, to eat more throughout the day and not have cravings later on. And then these cookie cutter plans don't teach you anything about hormones. So I talk a lot about hormones because they relate to literally any time in your life. As long as you're past puberty, which all of you here are, hormones are very relevant because they are chemical messengers that control your mood, your energy, all of these biofeedback markers, really. And so ones like progesterone and estrogen in particular, these help to regulate your menstrual cycle, cortisol, which is your stress hormone, thyroid, which is your metabolism hormones. And there's a lot more to the layers of thyroid hormones because there are multiple ones, but that's basically the master of your metabolism. And then insulin, which is your blood sugar hormone. So we want to know these key hormones. And of course, you don't have to know the functions of them like in and out, but it's important to know what's going on from that physiological standpoint, because when you're choosing to have, you know, even as simple as building your plate with protein, carbs, and fats, you know how these are actually impacting your hormones. And then you know how your hormones impact the way you feel, and the way you feel impacts the decisions that you're going to make on a day-to-day basis that will then get you closer to your long-term goals or your like bigger picture sort of goals. So all of that to say, we need to pay attention to our biofeedback, and we need to understand these key hormones. And something I do hear a lot whenever I'm talking about like not to follow keto, paleo, macro counting, whatever it is, someone will say, well, I did that before and it worked. And my question to that is, if it worked, why are you not doing it now? Because if it worked, it should be something that you feel like you can stick to, and it doesn't require a lot of time, energy, willpower, discipline. Any plan that involves a cheat meal or makes you feel like you need to have a cheat meal it's still dieting, and it's not something that works long-term, because we want to figure out how we can support our biofeedback day in and day out and know what to adjust. That's what truly works. The other thing, whenever people tell me, okay, well, this worked in the past, we can look at what actually got you here. So the decisions, the habits, the diet history that you have maybe followed for the last however many years. For some, it's, you know, for me, it was like maybe 7 or 8 years going from high school to post-graduating college. For others, it might be like 40 years of a diet history and different life stressors. For some, a lot of my clients in their like 20s to 30s, it's a lot of things they did in college and then in their early 20s. So we can look at what actually got you here, and we can assess your metabolism, and we can assess, you know, what's going on in your body that is showing up symptom-wise, and where did that come from? So these are some of the big ones, and just questions to ask yourself as well. So chronic calorie restriction. So maybe you did that and you felt like it worked for you because you lost weight. But this is, again, making it, each time you restrict calories, harder and harder to lose weight. So over time, your metabolism will adapt, and it will be harder and harder to lose weight at that same amount of calorie restriction. So chronic calorie restriction basically counts as anything less than your TDEE, which is your total daily energy expenditure. And we're not going to get too much into like figuring out your unique calorie needs and stuff like that. I have a lot more resources about that on my website, and I go through this one-on-one with my clients. But knowing that you want to be eating enough to support your total daily energy expenditure is really important for healthy metabolism. So chronic calorie restriction oftentimes can get people into this place of not only having cravings all the time because they're simply not eating enough throughout the day, but also feeling like they're storing a lot more fat and their stress hormones are really, really high. So that's one thing. Another one that I hear a lot is low carb. That worked for me because I lost weight. Low fat, that worked for me because I lost weight. Both of those are going to be at the expense of your hormonal health because we need fats and we need carbohydrates for thyroid hormones. Or going vegan or vegetarian for an extended period of time. This is super stressful on the body because you're not getting a lot of the bioavailable nutrients that you need. And it can also cause a lot of digestive issues because you're not supporting your digestive function by restricting those animal proteins. It makes it harder to produce stomach acid. And when we don't have enough stomach acid, that's where we start to feel bloated, constipated, and then have more food sensitivity show up. So that's another thing that I find gets people into a lot of trouble with where they're at right now. If you've lost weight and then gained it back, that's another huge indicator of just having those metabolic adaptations. And this is also going to make it harder and harder to lose weight. So if you think of a period of time where you did lose a lot of weight and then you gained it back or maybe even more, again, that's not something that worked for you, right? So you lost weight, but then you gained it back. So we wouldn't consider that working for you long-term. And then we have yo-yo dieting, which we've talked about a lot so far in this challenge. And that's basically kind of going between restricting, whether that's restricting for a day or restricting for the entire week. And then on the weekend, you feel like you need a cheat meal, or when you go out to dinner, you feel like you need a cheat meal. Or maybe you're like considering yourself good up until 4 p.m. and then you're bad the rest of the evening, right? So that goes into that yo-yoing sort of category. And then also having these unrecognized stressors. So these can also get us into trouble and show up as cravings, but also, of course, show up as more chronic issues. So the chronic bloating and digestive issues, the chronic fatigue, the trouble sleeping, a lot of these things that we can work on improving whenever we give the body the fuel that it needs and we support our blood sugar, we support our gut health, and we look at other stressors that we might not see as stressors, like under-eating, never exercising. So these are some examples also of unrecognized stressors. So like going through pregnancy or not getting quality sleep consistently, having chronic digestive issues that you're just kind of ignoring, or you've accepted as like, oh, I have this IBS diagnosis, I just have to live with it. So you're dealing with these chronic digestive issues. Your relationships, those can be stressful. Maybe you have an elderly parent that you have to take care of, or you have an in-law that's super stressful for you. And then job, which I think is what people recognize. Even if you like your job, it can still be a source of stressor. So stressors don't have to feel bad. They can come from a lot of different areas. Also, other unrecognized ones I see are over-exercising, doing a lot of cardio, which we talked about yesterday, how more cardio can cause more cravings. So again, just an example of things that can fall into that stress category. So what we're doing instead, when we recognize what got us here, we can look to see how can we customize our approach instead of following a cookie cutter. All right, I'm just going to follow keto, or I'm just going to Google some like paleo recipes on Pinterest and start cooking those regularly. We can figure out how to customize our plan. And the first thing is going to be focusing on the foundations first. So what we're talking about throughout this challenge, that includes a lot of the foundational elements, especially blood sugar balance, right? So blood sugar balance, eating in a rest and digest state, eating enough calories, making sure that you're addressing those different stressors. And then from there, we can understand how our body works. So looking at our biofeedback and looking at the health of our hormones and figuring out what it needs to feel good and how to properly fuel it. And when we listen to our biofeedback, this is how we can decide what's working and what's not working. So for example, if I have a client who says they had a couple of nights where they just could not stay asleep. So maybe they fell asleep kind of quickly, like, 10, 15 minutes, but they kept waking up throughout the night. We look back to see if they're getting enough carbohydrates throughout the day, and come to find out with their dinner, they were doing just basically protein, fat, and non-starchy vegetables. So we add some starchy vegetables in there. We add some carbohydrates, maybe potatoes or cassava, pasta, or something like that, and they fall asleep and they stay asleep because we've lowered stress on the body. So their blood sugar isn't dipping throughout the night and they're not waking up feeling wide awake. So then eventually they know they're waking up throughout the night. They look back at their day, they see they didn't get enough carbs, or maybe they had other stressors going on, like they had a really intense workout and that's impacting their sleep at night. So that's just an example of using biofeedback to figure out what needs adjustments. And another kind of way to wrap this all up is oftentimes people will use the scale to measure progress. They step on the scale day in and day out because that's their long-term goal. Like their actual outcome goal is, I want to lose weight, but they ignore all of these little process goals, which is kind of what we're hitting on in this challenge. Process goals are, making sure that you're eating a good quality breakfast, protein, fat, carbs, making sure that you're eating in a rest and digest state. These are tangible, doable things that are in our control. And then we have these larger outcome goals, like I want to lose weight, right? So that is something that we can't measure on a day-to-day basis. And even if you do step on the scale every single day, that doesn't tell you what you need to do for that day. That doesn't tell you about the habits and things that you want to be focusing on. So instead of using the scale to measure progress, which also another like huge topic just all on its own, that can fluctuate within 5 pounds on a day-to-day basis. So it's not really a reliable measure of health either, or of progress. And then the second thing is using like good and bad food consumption. Like, oh, I was good because I ate XYZ, or I ate these bad foods. That's not going to measure progress either, right? Like the food is just food. It's completely neutral. And I don't consider eating good foods as like being a measure of progress, just like eating bad foods isn't undoing your progress either. So instead of looking at these areas, which again, I think is just kind of ingrained in us from the diet industry and the health industry, right? So health industry focusing mostly on like weight as a measure of your health, but there's more to it than that. And so what we want to focus on instead is actually paying attention to how your body feels on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis and being really in tune with that. And looking at all these different biofeedback markers to figure out what's working and understanding what needs adjustment. And of course, you don't have to be able to do this all on your own at first. Like this is why having a coach and having somebody to talk to helps you to filter through and figure out like, okay, I'm feeling this way, which means this, which means I can work on improving or adjusting this specific area. So it's not something you have to like understand right away. It's practice that has to be it's a skill that has to be practiced and developed over time. But whenever you just simply understand, like, these are my biofeedback markers, my cravings, my hunger, my sleep, my digestion, my energy, when those things are either, checked off, or maybe they're suffering a little bit and they're not where you want them to be, that's where you can focus on making changes to improve those specific areas. And so that's how we figure out what's going to actually work for us. And if fat loss is your goal, this is still the prerequisite. You cannot lose weight while having your energy suffer, your sleep suffer, having cravings all the time, having hunger all the time. So you have to work on getting those things really, really dialed in. And then the weight loss goal will be so much easier to achieve. And you can figure out what slight adjustments you need to make for that. So for a lot of the women I work with, it's usually getting out of that like extreme all or nothing mentality and finding the balance while supporting those biofeedback markers. And that's what helps to make the weight loss much more easy and sustainable, because it does not have to be difficult. So again, just figuring out like what of these biofeedback markers you want to pay attention to on a regular basis. I recommend tuning in with all of them if you can. Especially, if you understand where you are in your cycle, that's a game changer for a lot of people. So with my clients, we work on actually tracking our cycle, and we know what day, what week we're in, and that helps a lot to determine how to make certain food adjustments. Okay, so day 2, just to recap, we're going back square one, eat without distractions, right? So this is the big focus for today, and then every day from here. And I really just want you to focus on eating without distractions with one meal. So just pick one meal and start with that. And also inside Practice Better, you have the mealtime habits for better digestion. So I'm going to switch over my screen, and I'm going to just make sure you have what you need inside Practice Better. So this is the module for day 2. And basically, I talked about a lot of this. This is the lesson. I talked about a lot of this in today's live, but make sure you take some time to read this. And with any of these, we want to commit to just what feels simplest and what we know we can do. So if you are saying, okay, I really want to work on eating without distractions, I want you to be so sure that you can accomplish that. On a scale from 1 to 10, it's like an 8 out of 10, basically. So you're very sure that you can accomplish that, and make it realistic by saying like, okay, I'm going to eat without distractions with one meal, right? So if you said, even if I said, I'm going to eat without distractions every single meal this week, again, an example of going to an extreme, that's not going to happen. I know that's not going to happen for me. So I'll pick one meal each day to eat without distractions and start there. And again, just kind of highlighting why it's so important to eat without distractions, both physiologically and psychologically. So if you have not been convinced yet, make sure you read through these 3 big bullet points. And then also kind of a chart here to figure out where you can start swapping. So instead of eating a salad while checking your emails, you're going to just block out 20 minutes on your schedule and get away from the computer to sit down and eat your lunch. And you won't have as many digestive issues or bloating or feeling uncomfortable the rest of the day. So you actually get a lot of time back if you do this, blocking out 20 minutes. So think about where you're going to start shifting and where you're going to be more intentional with your mealtime, where you sit down and you eat that meal, thoroughly chew your food without distractions. So that's your to-do for today, is just picking one meal. And before you eat, sit down, make sure you don't have those distractions, take some deep breaths, shift into that rest and digest state, and really focus on chewing your food, putting your fork down between bites, realizing when you start to feel full, and also getting the full satisfaction and enjoyment out of that meal. And then, of course, we're building on our challenges. So from day 1, you're going to continue focusing on protein, fat, carb, balanced meals, especially with breakfast, and relaxing with that meal as well. So this is the bonus download that I wanted to show you. So mealtime habits for better digestion. This is a great checklist if you're struggling with bloating, reflux, constipation. There are more things if you've been dealing with this for a while that we might need to look at, but this is still a prerequisite to start with. So sitting when you eat, setting aside time for each meal. And again, this is basically what we're focusing on today, eating without distractions, taking deep breaths before your meals, chewing your food, putting work, computer, phone away, trying not to eat whenever you're stressed out. This is another kind of topic we could elaborate on, but you don't want to eat if you're angry or stressed out. This is really good, this tip for supporting stomach acid production. And that is you could sip on raw apple cider vinegar before your meal. Or if you want to do something more supplement related, then there's a supplement I recommend for increasing stomach acid. But I don't want to make that general recommendation in this challenge. So this is a good place to start, that you can just use food to increase stomach acid. Avoid drinking a lot of liquids with your meal. So try not to chug a bunch of water, especially ice cold water, which can dilute your stomach acid and make you feel more bloated. And then eating to satiation. So we're eating until we're full, but we're not completely stuffed. And this is more likely to happen if you're in a rest and digest state. So all the more reason to kind of slow down with your meals. And a lot of people get caught up in like what the right portion sizes are. There is no cookie cutter portion sizes or one size fits all portion sizes. You have to figure out what is enough food for you by slowing down and paying attention to how you feel at the end of that meal. I will say that a meal should keep you full for 3 to 4 hours. So if you find yourself having a meal and then you want a snack, or you want something to eat a couple hours later or an hour later, then that's usually a sign that you did not eat enough with your meal. The other thing I'll say on kind of like hunger and portion sizes is if you do have a slower metabolism, so thyroid hormones are slowed down, and this can come from chronic dieting or under eating or a lot of stress, but your hunger hormones are going to be more dysregulated. So you might feel full very, very easily, but you're not getting adequate calories throughout the day. So that can show up later on as cravings and overeating. So again, nuances that this is why it helps to get more of the like one-on-one support that walks you through the right things in the right order and figuring out if you're truly eating enough or if you just need to eat more during certain times of the day to balance out your calorie intake throughout the day. And again, this is important for your thyroid hormones, your metabolism, and of course, if you have fat loss goals as well. So you have that Mealtime Habits for Better Digestion resource inside Practice Better. And if you need help logging into that, again, let me know. It looks like, I think there's like 35 of you who are actually fully registered inside Practice Better, but there's about 60 of you guys signed up for the challenge. So I just want to make sure everybody has access to those materials. And I've also been messaging with a few of you one-on-one inside Practice Better. So don't hesitate to reach out to me there too. I'm yours for the next 5 days. You have my full support. You can ask any and all questions. And so definitely take advantage of that. All right, so now we have a couple minutes. If anybody wants to post their questions, whether it's on today's topic, yesterday's topic, so blood sugar balance, breakfast options, digestion, eating in a rest and digest state, any of those. And if you're watching on the replay, you can also post your questions there as well. So you're welcome. Thanks for coming live. I really appreciate it. And again, if you can't make these lives, it's not a big deal. I know it's the middle of the day and we have work and life stuff. So watching the replay, I consider that just as good. Just let me know that you're here watching the replay so I know. Okay. So that's it for today. I will be back here tomorrow at same time, 12 p.m. Central. And if you have any questions, post them in this group. There's also going to be an accountability post for today. If you haven't posted there yet, check that out. And be sure to log into Practice Better to make sure you go through the lesson and check off your task for today so I can see it. Okay, that is all for now. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you later. Bye.